No music, no music. And a little bit more house lights up, please. That's it. I can see the audience. I don't understand the goddamn thing she just said. I don't know if it was nice, not nice. He said he was an old whatever. And I don't know how many people here understand what I'm saying even, because I couldn't understand even with the earphones much of what was said, but I was astonished at some of the hard laughter, and it was totally intimidating to me to come up and follow somebody to talk about love when, you know, I'm sort of an abrasive person. And I was on the stage with my wife, and somebody else was introducing us, and they said that they could not understand why you're leaving me. Don't leave me. I was just talking. Like I said, I need company. They couldn't understand what Richard and Gloria had in common, why Gloria would be with such a person, right? Until it occurred to them that both Richard and Gloria were in love with the same person. Nobody gets that joke? It's going to be very hard. 30 years ago, I'll talk real slow, so if you have those things on, they can do the translation. 30 years ago, next February, 23rd of February, I put on the first TED conference. I'm 78, so you can figure out how old I was. And I lost money and had a hard time filling the room. And nobody knew what the hell I was talking about with TED. Some people thought my name was Ted. So many people thought my name was Ted that on the program cover, about TED 5 or so, they had a funny cartoon of me by a very good cartoonist and said, "My name is not Ted." The idea, which is now such an old idea, but was new then, and that's what's remarkable. 30 years ago, the idea of convergence, of technology, entertainment, and design converging, that they all needed each other, was an idea that hadn't occurred to anybody else. So that was the idea. And now we just take it, of course, for granted that it's all together. There's an interesting, watching people, they're talking about Google. Google was announced there for the first time. Mickey Schulhoff, who was president, you don't know who Mickey is, but I'm telling you his name anyway. He was president of Sony USA, and he gave out shiny discs to everybody, and nobody knew what a CD was. And now maybe we still don't know what a CD is again. That it came and it went. I did a conference in Japan, the third or fourth conference I did in Kobe, Japan. This is all before the internet. And the only reason I could do the conference from New York City, the only way of doing it, because of 12 or 13 hours difference, was because of the fax machine. I sent faxes all day. My fax machine worked all night, translating and coming back. And the whole thing was run to develop it with a fax machine. And now I just threw out my fax machine. I just changed my phones last week and didn't put in new fax lines. So anything you think is here isn't. Anything that anybody is talking about does not have permanence. And some of you do think that Twitter will be here. And Facebook will always be here and can't imagine a world without certain things. They're not going to be here. Everything is going to change, and it always has. It always has. That's not just some phenomenon of today, of quick change because we're living in those times. It's going to keep on changing, and it does. And I think that's nifty. My conversation, I know you're running late because people talk too long. I know that.
No. I wanted to ask you something.
Go ahead.
Is things changing for the better? What do you think?
There's always things that happen that are shitty, and there's always things that happen that are good.
Overall?
No, there's big cycles of things. And to think when you're in this little teeny piece of a cycle and it's going like that, you think that's forever. We're just in a teeny little framework with our climate, with wars, with relationships, with economies. We are looking at a teeny little sampling. We live in a teeny sampling. We have an arrogance that this is forever. Every moment we think is a we're not. You're just foolish. There isn't a cycle. There's not a cycle even to one's life. At 45 years old, which is old for most of you here, I was totally bankrupt and destitute. And now I live in a big mansion, and I never tried to make money. It just happened. I spent less than I made. But if you take any little piece of my life and thought that was my life, or expanded it in the same trajectory, you would have had a completely different life. We're arrogant. We're arrogant that we think we're a species. They estimate that we have 100 trillion cells in our body, and that 90% of them are separate, different animals that are listed in LaRosa's book of animal life. Okay? So I'm not a species, I'm a zoo. Right? David Gallo, who called me on the phone a long time ago, probably 15 years ago, and said, I didn't know who he was. He had heard of me and Ted. And he said, I have some terrific things I'd like to show you. I said, come over. He was in Woods Hole. I'm in Newport. It was 2 hours away. 2 hours later, he was at my door. And he's never left. And we are close friends. And it is remarkable to realize that he said 70%, it's 72% of the Earth's surface is the ocean. 72%, and we don't know anything about it. The first time in public that he showed, or that was showed, the black smokers, which he could have given his whole talk on the black smokers in the Pacific, and are now found all over. Of those tube worms, he named one tube Wurman, that those tube worms, there's one person that laughs down there, so one person understands English, is just very nice. I'll just talk to you, young lady. You have a nice smile anyway. The ends of these tube worms are in really, really cold water. And their heads, the ones that peek out of these tubes, are in superheated water. Huge differences, hundreds of degrees. David, what's the degree change between them? Fahrenheit or Celsius, either one. That's the difference between here and here. That's astonishing. They watched an earthquake down there once. The Alvin was down there. And they watched the earthquake, got the hell out of there, and came back about a year later, and it was all grown back. All the animals are back. It was devastated. It's the fastest growing life forms on Earth. And I went to school, and we were told that all life comes from photosynthesis. Everything was fucking wrong. But isn't that a pattern? Weren't we told that the smallest thing was the atom? That then they told us it was made of the neutron, proton, and electron, which didn't make any sense because they must be smaller if they made up the atom. But we said, and that's what we put on our test. I mean, they were conning us while they were conning us, right? And now we know there's 16 subatomic particles, and there'll be another 16 before I die. That was completely wrong. So photosynthesis and the atom, and that space was a vacuum. And when they found the black hole, they said it was the biggest vacuum at all. Now they say it's the densest part of the universe. The opposite. The absolute opposite. And the Bauhaus movement was a whole art movement subtracting things. Nothing we have is on solid ground, and isn't that wonderful? Tomorrow it can be all different. And I know you're worried about the economy, other people are worried about global warming. And in 1783, half the people, or almost half the people, half the livestock for sure, maybe only 20% of the people, in Iceland died from an eruption of a volcano, 1783, that went, because the jet stream goes that way, and we found that out 4 or 5 years ago, goes towards England and down Europe. And they had a year in Europe where there was just no crops. They couldn't grow anything. It was this fine sulfuric acid-laden pumice. The same thing that stopped the planes. They didn't have planes to stop in 1783. We know that happened because Benjamin Franklin was in Paris and wrote back about it. It went down across Europe, over the Nile Valley and into India. And what you probably have never studied in your books, that this volcano, about 70 or 80 miles to the east of the one that went off a little while ago and is now doming again, killed 5 million people from 3 years of lack of crops in the Nile Valley in India. And you don't even learn that in your history books. Shit happens. And that's not isolated. 1815, another winter, change of winter. There was a summer that they lost the crops. But isn't it interesting, 1783, when there's no crops and something famous was said that wasn't really said, let him eat cake. And she really didn't say, let him eat cake, Marie Antoinette, but it is indicative of the fact that they had no wheat crops, and that lack of growing, the starvation, certainly brought about and was something to do with the French Revolution. And we don't learn that. We don't learn the unintended circumstances that occur of things. And I'm fascinated with that. The name of the volcano, by the way, it's spelled L-A-K-I, but it's pronounced Larky. That's the pronunciation in Iceland. Iceland's a terrific place to visit. How many people have visited Iceland here? It's worth it. It's lovely to go around. You can't go all the way around now because of that volcano, but you can go somewhat around. And it's really lovely place to go around. So I'm supposed to show I have some slides. I know I'm late.
You have your clicker.
I have my clicker someplace. I think I probably put it in a pocket. Do you know, did somebody see where I put it? Yeah. Left? It's left for you, right for me. You see, that happens when you face each other. When you look in the mirror, the same thing happens. I'm trying to reinvent a few things before I die. And I did TED, as you know, and I did TED Med, and I did a conference called EEG, and I ran a bunch of other conferences. And I've done a whole shitload of books on all different subjects, and a lot on medicine, and that's how I know our medical speaker before, because he spoke at my TED Med conference. He didn't show so many things, but he gives a good speech, just too many things. I can't remember all those things he showed me. Sometimes you want to show everything you know, right? And you can't. But I've already told him that, so I'm not talking behind his back. I did a conference in September. There was a brand new model. Different than this. Different than TED, for sure. I don't own TED anymore. I sold that in 2002. I decided to subtract... Huh?
Is that the 5?
No, www. I'm talking about what I did in September. And then I'm going to go and tell what I'm going to do next October, and then you can get me off the stage. Although I'd promised I was going to have Dave come up and we were going to have a conversation.
So should we switch?
What? Yeah, you can have Dave come up here now. I like you here. Wait till I finish doing this. So, come up, Dave. Come on, you can come up, David. He's going to help me with 555. But the WWW conference, I decided that I would have no presentations. I would subtract every single thing I could subtract out of a conference, because I had already subtracted white men in suits on panels. I had subtracted the lectern. I can't stand the fact that that's off-center. The auditorium's in the center. I said I have to sit in the center. That's why I'm sitting here. Are those people there better than the people over here? It doesn't make any sense. Many times I give a speech and they have an aisle down the center. So the 100% place you're talking is a blank, empty space. Well, that's stupid too. And why should I be back there when I can be closer and see people's faces? Well, maybe they'll change that. He was at WWW. I chose 50 of the best people I've ever had in any 5 TED conferences. I ran TED for 18 years. And I paired them together. The most incredible magician in the world, David Blaine, with Julie Taymor, who did Lion King. Herbie Hancock with somebody else, and Quincy Jones, Will.i.am of the Black Eyed Peas. The top biologist in the world, E.O. Wilson, with Craig Venter, the person who first sequenced the human genome. The guy who's head of the Jupiter mission with a person who came from CERN, who just did the Higgs particle. And on. Somebody from DreamWorks, the head of DreamWorks, and Norman Lear, who did All in the Family. Some things you'll know of, some things you won't. But really, hot shit people, terrific people. And they didn't always know who they were going to be paired with. And they didn't know, they didn't necessarily do the same thing. And they didn't face the audience. I had 2 couches here, and one sat there, and I sat here. I faced the audience. And I thought up 25 premises, different premises, and I just threw them out. Like, you're an astrophysicist and you're a small particle physicist, and yet you look at the periodic table differently, and you have a different definition of the word elegance. And that's all I said. And then they had improvised conversation, intellectual jazz. And then when I was bored, I sent them off. Right?
Oh, yeah, that's very true, very true.
He was paired with a extreme storm chaser, a meteorologist. And he happened to know that person. But many people just met being there. It was the best conference I ever did. All of a sudden, Yo-Yo Ma would get up and play.
And at one point with Will.i.am from Black Eyed Peas.
And with Will.i.am, they would rap, and it was astonishing. And I was terrified. And in fact, I am always terrified. And the one thing that I do better in this room than anybody, that I excel in, is that I have more sense of my terror and my ignorance than anybody else here. I know how stupid I am. No, it's not funny. I know how stupid I am. It's not for applause. That was not a moment of applause. I don't think that's...
They're applauding your honesty.
No, but it's the truth. It's that from that position of not knowing, I start from zero at everything I do. Books on medicine, books on sports, I did 22 guidebooks to cities I didn't know anything about. Well, sounds funny. Hard to get funding. So I've done 80-some books without a publisher. Because no publisher in the right mind, if I went in and said, I want to do a book on Southwest cooking, and I don't know anything about it, but I think it tastes good. Give me an advance. See, what my life is the journey, is documenting the journey from not knowing to knowing. My terror comes from the beginning. I begin everything not knowing. And it also comes from the projection of the humiliation at the end if I never find out. And that's what this conference was about. So now I've invented another conference, which Dave is going to help me, which is called 555. It's going to start next October, and it's going to be a 5-week-long conference. It's going to be 5 successive Mondays in a different city around the world. And it's going to be a one-day conference with only 5 speakers. And each speaker I'm going to ask to speak in a very narrow band. No generalizing, no telling of a whole field. But asking somebody in a very narrow band to predict 5 years in the future within that field. So I'll come up with 25 predictions, because that fascinates me. And everything I do fascinates me. And that's why I do it. I don't have a committee. I'm trying to give you a life lesson. Do what you really love to do. Do what is interesting. We had the gentleman from Boston University. Basically, his message was that education comes from remembering what you're interested in, of tracking your interests and sucking it in and being happy with that, not feeling guilty about that. Okay, then I have this other project. Now I have to get up and look at it. No 2 cities in the world do their maps to the same scale or with the same legends. And now I know you think I'm not telling the truth, but it's been proved. There's a $500,000 proof of it. You can't compare one place to another. You think Google, you can't compare a city to another. They're not based on information. A city is made of patterns. Patterns made understandable. Mankind's ability to understand. It spells M-A-P, map. A map is a fundamental tool. Fundamental. You map, every diagram you saw was a map of something. It wasn't a cartographic map, but it was a map of some information over time or some information with some numbers about it. So, a friend of mine, Jack Dangerman, who is, you've never heard of him, but you've heard of him, great. Oh, good. Well, then you'll know what I say is the truth. He makes more software for maps than anybody in the world. He owns his own company. It's called Esri. He's around the world. He has about 8,000 employees. And he hosted my WWW conference. So he sort of helps me realize ideas. And this is an idea about comparative mapping. And you say, well, why would you want to do that? Well, besides the business ideas of understanding what goes on in another city and comparing your city to that city and understanding success and failure in another city and population and content, and you might want it if you're in the military or if you're in the shipping business or you might want to say, I want to locate a factory someplace and see how I can compare 2 cities together or someplace, or just understand success and failure someplace. It doesn't exist. I was at a loss because I couldn't understand Greek. And everybody who lives in another city in the world can't understand another city if they don't have things at the same language. Everything is called something different. One city, it's industrial land use. One city, it's light industrial, heavy industrial. It's just all called different. You can't have any patterns. So we did this exhibit with 16 cities, which we compared. It was only up for a week. A map is a pattern made understandable. There's my name. John Kamen is head of Radical Media, and Jack Dangerman, who that young lady knows. But that's Will I Am. Go ahead.
I mean, it's full of information, but visually it's stunning. And to me, it becomes an experience. And experience is so important to me. We always talk about big data, but to me, the experience, even this is big data, but it's presented in a way that you're enveloped by these incredible images of that are so realistic and so awesome.
I want to say to the gentleman talking about big data, that big data is not the issue. It's big understanding is the issue. You know? That's the exhibit. Just this was only up for a week. Then I did a web application. This is free. You can go online and get this. And we have 16 cities, and we have 16 levels of information. And if you point on any city and you change the scale, it changes in the other ones. And you can call up any cities you want. We're going to have 100 cities up there in a year. And we're going to have that Urban Observatory done with more cities. We're updating it. And in a year, it'll be in the Smithsonian Institute in Washington. So this is, we can see the scale goes up and down, and you can look at different patterns, and you can pull up different cities, and then we're going to eventually have urban observatories around the world. So that's a nice project I'm working on. And we're going to be able to talk to people in other cities that have these, and instantly when you speak English, they hear it in English, and they speak back to you in Greek, but you hear it in English. That will have instant translation back and forth of talking to people from these places to find out places and being able to see all the festivals that are going around the world at the same time. Hi. This was a clip that was on YouTube, and there's supposed to be sound. Yeah. This was the WWW conference, and this is just a short clip.
We've heard a few people over the last day and a half talk about climate change and whether belief versus knowledge. I think overwhelmingly, certainly climate scientists, oceanographers,
Sure.
meteorologists, you can see that it's happening. I mean, there are obviously counterexamples, but there's a big snowstorm or a big cold wave, but for every big snowstorm or big cold wave, there's 5 data points you have which pointing to it's warm.
Though it amazes me that if you gave all 7 billion people a coach airline seat, we all fit in a box that's about a cubic mile, mile by mile by mile. You can put 7 billion people in a cubic mile in a little
cubic
airline.
mile, so we're in this dimension too.
That's big.
That's worse than a coach seat.
Yeah, it's worth saying. yeah. But you can fit everybody in that box. Yet we've managed.
This is the 555 conference. That's also online. You can get that. And then this, I will show at the very end. There is an app. I'm truly not selling, but there is an app of the entire WWW, unedited, unrehearsed. I don't believe in rehearsing. And all 50 speakers that you can get. It's just called WWW Conference. But it costs $3.99, and I'm sorry about that. I can't give it away to you. If I get a nice letter, I'll put $4 in an envelope and send it back to you. I have another project. This is what I'll end with. And you can walk out if you want while it's going on. It won't hurt my feelings or the film's feelings. And it's another project which goes along with the Urban Observatory, which is called 1920-21. And it's about 19 cities that will have more than 20 million people in the 21st century. And this is a little film we did for a TV series we're promoting on 1920-21. Okay?
Cities. They are home to more than half of the world's population. Within the next 40 years, it will be 2/3. 70 million people will move to a city each year. 1.4 million per week. 130 every minute. What is the gravitational pull of cities? And why is the attraction so universal? Why are they organized the way they are? What do cities tell us about us? Cities, a groundbreaking television series, will explore every aspect of city living in every corner of the world through a unique and innovative lens. The series will observe the fascinating ways in which we, as human beings, use our resources, our instincts, and our ingenuity to thrive within these massive organisms of our own creation. How do we move? How do we communicate? How do we manage our food and water supplies? How do we satisfy our energy needs? How do we consume? and recycle? How do we learn? How do we trade and invest? How do we maintain the health of our children, our aging, and ourselves? With human migration to cities happening on such an unprecedented scale, how will all these things change? Cities will be a comprehensive and voyeuristic survey of our world's largest concentrations of population. How they work, how they evolve, and how their future will define our future. Cities, understanding the way we live.